What's up, my wizards? It's Dev. Mtg. We like it a magic, and no, I can't seem to find any of the cats right now. But on another note, would you like a fresh pastry?
I'm sorting through some heinous haters like a pooper scooper. I'm just trying to take my life like a Koopa Trooper. I'm Double Mario, that mean I'm super. And I'm freaking dangerous like a Chupa Cabre. Got them all day like a Kanye, but I'm way better getting cheddar in Monterey. But Jack, you don't know, man. You got the show, man. You want roast beef? Well, I'm Arby's.
Yum. Just delicious. But seriously, the cats are okay. I just really like pastries. But you know, something else that I like is Magic the Gathering decks. You may have noticed over the last 5 years, kind of all I talk about. So today, let's talk about my favorite deck of the entire season. It's only the second deck of the season, third deck of the season on the channel, but I can already tell you this is going to be my jam for the whole next 2 or 3 months while we're in Throne of Eldraine Standard. So today, let's do a little talking about $25 cat food, which would usually be really expensive cat food, but in the context of a Magic deck, it's fairly cheap. See, the cats are fine. There's Ziggy right there. I did not, in fact, make pastries out of my beloved cats. But anyway, the main reason that this deck is so cheap in the first place is because the two primary components are 15 cents a piece. You got your Cauldron Familiar, and you got your Witch's Oven. And in case you haven't peeped the joke at this point, basically you're just throwing this poor cat in the oven once a turn, because when you sacrifice the cat to the oven, it makes a food. You could use that food to bring back the cat, and you just do this over and over and over until you've drained your opponent 20 times, which seems like a bit of a slog. Hello, my friend Ziggy. But anyway, it seems like that's a very silly idea for a deck. And it kind of is, but there are definitely ways that you can do this multiple times in a turn once you get multiple Witch's Ovens out, and there's even ways to do it more than 4 times in a given turn in this deck. So stay tuned. There's a lot going on in this thing. You all right, buddy? You in a place where you're nice and settled now? You comfortable? All right, let's continue. Now, the reason that we can pitch the cat in the oven, this is such a mean deck. The reason that we can do that multiple times in a turn, and sometimes even more than 4, is because we're playing 3 Manifold Key in the deck. This is pretty much the silliest card you could possibly include in this entire deck, and one of the only things it actually does is supercharge our oven production, our pastry production, by untapping Witch's Ovens at just 1 mana a piece and just 1 mana to cast. So it's not super mana intensive. We can get a lot of activations if we've got a bunch of Manifold Keys out. But every now and again, if we don't have the combo out, because we won't all the time, this is basically kind of Witch's Ovens 5 through 7 in the deck. We're not going to play all 4 because I don't want to just see nothing but this all game when I'd rather be seeing Witch's Ovens. There's going to be games where you see 2 of these, but you don't see Witch's Oven 1. And that's where it's pretty bad, but if all else fails, then sometimes you can pay 3 mana and tap the key and make a 3-power guy unblockable, and that'll be nice too. Let's keep moving, because this deck just cannot function without Midnight Reaper. This card is unbelievable at all times, but especially in this deck, where if you're getting 2 or 3 Witch's Oven activations over a given turn, then suddenly you're just drawing 3 cards. You're drawing into more Witch's Ovens, more Manifold Keys, more Midnight Reapers, more Cauldron Familiars if you want them. I mean, usually 1 is fine, but at the same time, you're just drawing into all of your gas, and yeah, you don't gain the life off of Cauldron Familiar anymore once you have a Midnight Reaper out, but I'll trade a life gained for a card drawn pretty much any day of the week. You gotta play the card. Play all 4 of these. But another important 3-drop that we're on the deck here is Ayara, which I'm only playing 3 copies of, but I'm actually thinking about going up to 4. You kind of need it every single game. It speeds up the clock considerably. It basically doubles up the damage and life gain that you're getting off of Cauldron Familiar and Witch's Oven interacting. So you kind of have to play this card too, and occasionally it'll let you draw even more cards. I've sacrificed Midnight Reaper to this a bunch of times, as a matter of fact, because there's going to be times where against aggro decks, or pretty much any deck, against which your life total is getting low, then you might want to go ahead and get rid of a Midnight Reaper, or even 2, in those situations, so you can start gaining life off of Cauldron Familiar again, kind of put your life total back into the green, And sometimes being able to sacrifice Midnight Reaper to Ayara is that's really important, so keep that in mind. But it's also nice to be able to sacrifice a Midnight Reaper and just draw 2 cards. That's pretty sweet too. But aside from just Cauldron Familiar, we've got a ton of 1-drop creatures in this deck, so it's pretty easy to efficiently and consistently get damage and drains and whatnot off of Ayara. Here's the thing, that's the basic shell of the deck right there. Aside from that, you could play whatever black cards you want, or even artifacts. At first I was playing Ginger Brute, and Golden Egg, and they're just not great for this deck. There's not super high impact, you know. I thought Ginger Brew would speed up the clock, and Golden Egg draws cards, and they're both food you can sacrifice to get Cauldron Familiar back. It's not as good as I wanted it to be. But aside from that, people are trying out all kinds of stuff, especially at the budget level in this deck. You know, people are trying Tempting Witch. I did that. I did not care for it. Same thing with Bake Into a Pie. That's very expensive. Ironically, it's expensive in a budget deck. 4 mana is not where I want to be on pretty much any of the casting costs of our cards. I want to keep it as efficient as possible. Bake Into a Pie didn't make it. Neither did Foreboding Fruit, which is probably the best food making card that didn't make the deck, even though, again, there were like 2 copies of it in the main deck to begin with. I just felt like we could do a little bit better with those slots. So here's what we actually did end up with here, starting with some creatures, because it turns out we got to play a bunch of creatures in the deck. We're going to play 4 copies of Gutterbones and 4 copies of Foulmire Knight here. Play your Gutterbones, drain with Ayara, sacrifice the Gutterbones, draw a card, get the Gutterbones back, put it into play again. Gutterbones does a lot of really cool things in this deck, and it's always nice to have a resilient 2-power 1-drop around. So, yeah, if you've got them, smoke them. Play some Gutterbones, but Foulmire Knight is a little bit more, what's the word, nuanced. I'll go with nuanced. Like, it's obviously not as strong as Gutterbones, but it is an important card in this deck. We want to draw cards above all else to find combo pieces, and this card has a built-in way to do that, so that's pretty sweet. But we also get a 1/1 Death Touch. If there's one thing this deck needs, it's time. And if you can hold off an attacking force, especially your opponent's biggest creatures, with a 1-mana 1/1 Death Touch and buy yourself a turn or 2, then you have done yourself a world of good. And Foulmire Knight can do that. There's a couple of other reasons to play it in the deck too, but needless to say, a 1/1 Death Touch is often a lot more imposing than people give it credit for. And the fact that it can also draw us a card, yeah, we want that in our combo deck, so play Knight. We're going to play 4 copies of Yarok's Finlurker. This, obviously not the best looking 2-drop in the world. But what's really important for us to do, especially at the budget level where we can't afford stuff like Murderous Rider, is to attack our opponent's hand. That's actually a lot more effective than you might think, especially combined with some of the other disruptive elements that are in this deck. This is not the only way to attack the opponent's hand that we're playing. But back to the matter at hand, while Ziggy's still attempting to be cute and pulling it off, oh my goodness, you are succeeding. But anyway, this is also just a 1/1 body. It's kind of fine, you know? It's a black creature, triggers Ayara when it comes down. It can be sacrificed to Ayara to draw a card, and very often I'll trade a 1/1 body for a card, especially on blocks or something. A block with Finlurker, sack it, draw a card. That's always pretty sweet play right there. And, you know, sacrifice it to Oven for a piece of food when you need a little bit of life. I mean, there's all kinds of things you can do in this deck with a 1/1 body. And there's ways to recur it, too. Get it back from the graveyard and just make your opponent exile another card, which is sometimes an important play. There's actually one more creature in this deck, and I mean, like, literally one more. There's 1 copy of Dread Malkin in here. Because cats, I guess, you know, if we're gonna meme this deck, we might as well go completely all out. But this is actually a pretty decent card. You know, I was looking for a good, decent budget 1-drop to kind of slip into the deck here, and Dread Malkin has been pretty good. You know, if I had the money to play like Knight of the Ebon Legion or something, I would do that instead, I think. But there are going to be turns where Dread Malkin will get big too, just as big as Knight of the Ebon Legion, and sometimes even faster. You know, if you got a couple of extra food tokens laying around, then you can freely sacrifice a Cauldron Familiar to a Dread Malkin, and then just sack a food to get back the Cauldron Familiar. No skin lost at that point. But there's also going to be turns where you throw a Gutterbones into the mix, and you make Dread Malkin big literally every turn. You know, you sacrifice Cauldron Familiar to Witch's Oven, whoops, you did damage to your opponent. So you get that Gutterbones back from your graveyard, put it in your hand, play it for a mana, and then sacrifice it to your dang old Dread Malkin. At that point, you're just getting 1 sack a turn on Dread Malkin, and you'll end up with like a 9/9 Dread Malkin. It's pretty crazy, and I've considered playing more copies of this card, but in the end, I think that we can probably do better stuff with the slots we have available to us, but Dread Malkin can impress you every now and again. But into the spells here, we're going to play 4 copies of Drill Bit, which is subtly like one of the best cards in the entire deck. The card is unbelievable. It's still really, really good, especially in a format full of slower, sort of mid-range decks to play a bunch of like kind of expensive payoff cards, you know, Golos and all the ramp cards like Circuitous Route that go along with it. Plus, you know, even in the relative early game, we can get Teferis and Okos and whatnot out of their hand before they ever have the chance of casting them. So Drill Bit is just insane when played on turn 2, and there's a bunch of ways of doing it. You know, a couple of quick tips here. Obviously, on turn 2, you can go like, well, let's say you can go turn 1, Witch's Oven. Then turn 2, Cauldron Familiar, into a Drill Bit. You don't even have to attack that turn. But another kind of sneaky one is turn 1, Foulmire Knight. And then almost no matter what your opponent plays on their turn 1, even if they do get a creature down, they are almost certainly not going to want to trade it with Foulmire Knight. They'll let a 1/1 Death Touch through because they can take a point of damage, right? It's much better to take a point of damage than lose their guy. Isn't that right? Right? Well, they take that point of damage, and then you can nail them with Drill Bits. So, actually, there's another good reason to play a 1/1 Death Touch in this deck. It almost always gets through like Gilded Gooses and whatnot. So do keep that in mind, too. But to finish off the main deck here, we're going to play 4 copies of Spark Harvest. Still a fine Magic card, Spark Harvest is. It's no Murderous Rider. And if I had the wild cards or the dough to buy Murderous Rider, it would definitely be what I would slot in instead of this would be replaced immediately with Murderous Rider. But that said, if we're looking for budget options, this is a great like 5 or 10 cents removal piece that still allows us to kill those early Okos and Teferis like even earlier than a card like Murderous Rider. You know, they get a turn 2 Oko and they went first. It's going to be like 2 full turns before you can Murderous Rider it. You know, that's terrible news. But Spark Harvest can take care of that Oko right away as soon as we get to go, at least. And it's very often worth sacrificing a Gutter Bones or a Cauldron Familiar or even like a Yarok's Finlurker or whatever to actually be able to do this in the relative early game. And again, in the case of like the Cat and Gutter Bones, like they're coming back anyway, you know? So you might as well. You're not really 2 for 1ing yourself in that case. So 1 mana is an amazing rate for what this card can actually do. Like, in case you forgot, it's a great Magic card, you know? And sometimes in the later-ish game, you won't even have to sacrifice a creature to play the card. It's just good. Give it a shot. I'm telling you, Spark Harvest is still a perfectly fine Magic card, especially in a deck that wants to sacrifice creatures anyway. But here are the lands. We're playing 21 of them because we're on a bunch of 1-drops. That said, I don't think we can go to like 19 or 20. I think 21 or 22 even is where we want to be because the deck is more mana intensive than you might think. Between the occasional Yarok's Finlurker activation and Manifold Key and like playing multiple cards in a turn, you know, and Gutter Bones activations, getting it back to your hand. There's a lot. You know, Dread Malkin activations. We're spending mana in this deck, so I don't think we can really go below 21, and 22 might actually be the wiser choice, but you know, I like to live dangerously. That said, I am still playing the 1 copy of Castle Locthwain. Even though this is a budget deck, we still need at least 1 copy of this. It's so good. Play 1, but if you got 4, you might want to do that. 2 or 3, do that. But at that point, you're affecting how many Witch's Cottage you can play. And Witch's Cottage that's a fine Magic card too that can occasionally get back Nyara or Midnight Reaper or some other important piece that we might need. So keep that in mind. I do love the plays, by the way, with Witch's Cottage. This is important, and I should mention it. If you've got a Witch's Cottage in your hand, play it, put a creature back on top of your library, and then you can sacrifice something. If you have a Midnight Reaper out, you'll draw it. You can sacrifice something to Ayara and draw it. You can Foulmire Knight and draw the card you put on top of your library. You can activate Castle Locthwain and draw the card that you put on top of your library. So keep that in mind. Witch's Cottage has a lot of ways to effectively just put the card directly into your hand in this deck, and that makes it a very good piece of cardboard. But here's the sideboard that we ended up on here. And before we go into it, I just want to say that if this weren't a budget deck, I would play Legion's End, at least like 2 or even 3 copies of it in the sideboard. It's a great Magic card, especially right now, but it is like $250 a piece. Not super over budget, but a little too budget for my taste because this entire sideboard cost about as much as the 2 Legion's End I'd like to play. So let's move into the board here. Starting with the 2 copies of Disfigure. Kills Risen Reap, which is very important, but it kills a bunch of other small creatures for just the 1 black mana. Very efficient card. I'll definitely play a couple copies of that. But also Duress, you know. Duress is a great proactive way of getting those Okos and those Fires of Inventions and those, you know, fairies out of our opponent's hand, and again, just a whole bunch of really problematic cards right now can be dealt with Duress. But that said, we are seeing some like adventure creatures see a lot of play, Brazen Borrower or whatnot, so I feel like Duress did take a little bit of a dip in power level, but it's still absolutely worth playing, no doubt. Now, all 4 copies of Noxious Grasp. Again, Oko, Teferi. This can kill both of them. Plus, pretty much every creature in mono green that we care about, that deck can go really fast and go way above us. It's a problem. So I like being able to take out Nisses and Yorvos and all kinds of stuff too. So yes, to Noxious Grasp, it's just a great card, and I do not regret playing all 4 copies in the board. All 4 will come in a good bit, as it turns out, because this is just going to be like better than Spark Harvest in a lot of matches. So just play Noxious Grasp. A couple of copies of Davriel, just like with Yarok's Finlurker. I like that this doesn't like restrict what kind of card they discard, or we can make them discard, you know, like if our opponent is down on cards, we can force them to discard that final Field of the Dead in their hand or something, and that's just a really good feeling. So play a couple of copies of Davriel, especially considering it's particularly good against decks like Field of the Dead that need a few turns to get going. And the way we can attack our hand, or their hand, especially post board, Davriel is a great way to speed up the clock. So I really like this card, and I'm thinking about putting at least 1 copy in the main for that matter. But we've also got the 4 Witches' Vengeance. This is kind of a concession. Couldn't play Legion's End, so I'm doing this instead. And this is actually been really good, y'all. Like, this will take out not only every zombie on the battlefield, all of our zombies are either expendable or we can get them back. So I don't care if we have to name zombie at all. As long as we get rid of like 10 Field of the Dead tokens, I'm happy. But this will also occasionally just like blow out Temur Elementals, you know, take out a Risen Reef or 2 and a Leafkin Druid or something. So that's sweet. You know, there's a few decks in the format right now, like Mono White aggro people are trying to play, and like Boros aggro people are still on. We also just blow out like 2 or 3 creatures all at the same time because they happen to have the same creature type. So this will actually come in handy more than you might think. I've been liking me some Witch's Vengeance because it's just going to be a one-sided wrath in a lot of games. Now here are your power rankings. The final score is Nintendo 64, which is a lot. That's a very high score. In case you didn't know, for a deck that's only like $25 or $30 on TCG Player. I mean, this is like the most budget version of this deck that you're going to see on YouTube, to my knowledge at least. And it is still really, really consistent and scores highly. You know? I mean, it's a bit of a meme, don't get me wrong. I mean, it's the cat food deck, but you'd be surprised how strong this deck can perform sometimes. Not only that, but the deck is surprisingly deep when it comes to sequencing a turn. I think I've had to hit thinking on Arena more times than I have with like any deck in the last 6 months. There's a lot of thinking with this deck, and although I've avoided gameplay for this video, I am going to put out gameplay of the deck. Don't worry, it'll be the next thing I put out, but I will give you at least 1 clip of gameplay in this video that I think you have to see to truly believe what this deck is capable of. See what I mean? If any of that looked like fun, then just check out the first link in the description. Go over to TCG Player and pick up any pieces that you need for this super cheap deck. It's going to be one of the cheapest decks that we do all season, I can pretty much guarantee. So, again, if you want probably like the most effective budget deck that we've done on the channel, in a really long time. Like, I almost want to say like ever, but in a really, really long time. Then check this thing out. It's super, super cheap to play, and it's about as much fun as you can have with a pile of cardboard. And you see, Ziggy made it through this entire video without getting eaten. Even once, even though you are tempting. I wouldn't make like pastry out of Ziggy though. I'd make like bacon or like pork pockets or something. You're a big bub is what I'm trying to say, you fat man. But I guess it takes one to know one, right? Anyway, I guess I'm out for this one, you know. If you want to, do check out the first link in the description. Go over to Cog Player. But aside from that, if you want to support content like this, consider joining the Patreon. It's only $1 a month. And for that $1 a month, I'll let you vote on what stuff you want to see next. Let you know what's coming up next. You know, a lot of information for just a soda or month or whatever you spend $1 on these days. I'm not sure. But in any case, I like to feel like I'm worth it, so help me out if you can. But even if you have no skrill to give, just hit the like button or just subscribe if you haven't done that yet. As a matter of fact, subscribing is probably what helps me the most. You know, help grow the channel, get this out to more people, put me in more recommended feeds and all that. Anything you can do to help, I'd really appreciate, because I work hard. I work hard for the money. Oh, so hard for it, honey. Also got to pay for this new place. So, like, yeah, patreon.com/SBMTG. Do the things. But in any case, I think I am actually done for this one. But I just want to talk about this deck for the next, like, 6 hours. So you will get gameplay of this, like, in the next day or two. Mark my words. I can't not do gameplay of this. It's just a ridiculous deck. And I'm going to be playing for the next 3 months anyway. So might as well, right? But I guess that I actually am done. I've said it a million times. I might as well be done at this point. Just let me know how you felt about it down there in the comments section. Anything you'd have changed, and how you've been having fun with the deck too, because I know you're going to go build it as soon as you watch this video. Just let me know how it works out. But in any case, I've been Deb from the place. Thanks for watching, my wizards. Spread love and be kind. Hey everybody, figured I'd keep talking to you for a second while the Patreon people go by. These are people that help with the channel, including Kristen and Brent. They're good people. This is the patron shout out. As I said, I'd do that, and I want to, because these people do actually mean a lot to me, because you helped me live my best life. You know, you kind of helped pay for the new place. You know, you're really awesome for that, because I don't know if you knew this, but my office that I've been working out of for the last 5 years, my office was my apartment's dining room. So that wasn't a good setup. Now I actually have like a real office, and I'm not done setting stuff up either. I've got to hang a couple of pictures and stuff. So there's things that I'm doing in here, but I just really appreciate you helping with that, because you definitely did help with this. So I just wanted to thank you, Kristen and Brent. I hope it's not one of those things where your name's like Kirsten, but it's spelled Kristen. I hope I'm getting it right. I also hope it's not one of those things where like you share this Patreon, so like one of you doesn't care about me and the other one is my patron or something like that. I just, you know, I hope that I'm addressing this to two people correctly. But anyway, you're awesome. That's what I mean to say. And so are all the other people whose names have probably stopped scrolling by at this point. So I'll shut up. Thanks everybody. Bye.